In a lot of ways, it was sort of a weird choice to pick me to write a hiking guidebook, because if some of you read my columns, you know I have a propensity for sometimes getting lost. And case in point, just this morning, I was hiking. I don't see him in the room today, so I can talk about him. Marco Barris and I went out for a hike. And I said, Marco, I just want to go for like 3 or 4 miles in Patchogue. He was going to show me. He's hiked on every single trail there. He's going to take me on someplace new today. And I said, I really got to get back. I got to get ready for this talk. I got some other things going on today. So let's just make really short. Make a long story short and a short long hike, or a short hike long. We wound up we were just chatting away, and he was supposed to be looking at the map. We drifted off. What started out as a 3 or 4 mile hike wound up to be more than 8 miles today. But it was worth it. It was great. It's always, we've also gotten lost, and I see some of my friends and colleagues and hiking companions here, Maggie Jones and Phil Pluff. And Andy Lynn couldn't make it tonight. He's in New York, but they're sort of our little triumvirate that joins us on the hikes. And Maggie's great with all the natural things. Phil is just a diehard, keeps going no matter what, and so is Andy. But anyway, we've as they well known and I've documented, we've taken more than one wrong turns, and I've always operated under the, so I call it the Blanche Dubois School of Navigation from the streetcar named Desire. She always relied on the kindness of strangers. So we had the sort of the same approach to navigation. So we would take a wrong turn. One time we wound up, after an 18-mile hiking day on the Nipmuc Trail near Willimantic, we wound up at the wrong trailhead where the car was supposed to be parked. We would have had to hike another 10 miles. It was getting dark. And just by chance, a woman named Karen came along and says, "You guys looking for something?" Or, and Maggie says, "Oh, we're lost. We need a ride." So anyway, she drove us back to our car. And another time doing the north-south trail in Rhode Island, we left our keys in one car. Another time, another woman was raking leaves. We stopped and chatted with her, and she wound up driving me to get my car where the keys were, and Maggie and Phil wound up raking her lawn. So it was a good deal. But anyway, so that's why I say it was kind of a weird choice to pick me. And so it was a steep learning curve, because I'm kind of an old school type of hiker, and would just go out and find a trail and start hiking. But working on this book had taught me the value of really paying attention to things, and it was a lot of technical work that I wasn't accustomed to. So it was kind of tough going at first, documenting the GPS coordinates and the elevation gains, and we go 1.37 miles on the blue trail and then switch off to the yellow trail and go another 200 feet and look for this and that. So it was different, but there was a value to that. I realized, you don't get lost. But as Tolkien said, all who wander are not lost. So it's a nice way to travel too, either way. So I encourage people to get out there and hike, and just for the heck of it, and follow your heart, and don't be afraid to take a trail, the road not taken. On the other hand, it's nice to have a real guide with specific directions to guide you as well. So I hope that this book achieves that goal and still kind of keeps that sort of spirit of going out there and following wherever your heart leads you. So, but before I start, I'd like to thank, of course, the Groton Library for hosting this. And I have a bunch of other talks that'll be coming up, and I'll let people know the schedule. I was really excited. Westerly United Theater is going to host a talk there. I'm going to be signing books at Bank Square Books, a number of other libraries, and so forth. So I'll keep everyone posted if you read my columns. And I appreciate, again, all your readers out there. I think about everybody as I'm writing. I think about the people like you in the audience, and what would people want to know? And so it's nice to see faces, so you're not just shouting down a well. Anyway, so in working on this book, I was sort of fixated on what makes a great hike. Do you want to lower the lights, anyone? Is someone near a light switch? We don't need to. You guys can see it okay? All right, that's fine. So number one, great views. Maggie, do you remember where this is? Yeah, that's on top of, oh, it says right on it, Chauncey. Of course, everybody could have said that. Chauncey Peak in Meriden. I was just up there, Tom, my son Tom was also in the back there. He and I were just there a couple weeks ago, and it's a great hike. And in fact, I did some work there helping with the Connecticut Forest and Park Association, which maintains like 800 and some odd miles of blue trails in Connecticut. And there's a group called the Rock Stars that go around and repairing trails and so forth. So I joined them for one day, and we hiked up Chauncey Peak, and we've moved some boulders to serve as steps. But anyway, it's a great view, and that forms the spine of Connecticut. It's a basalt ridge that goes all the way from Long Island Sound to the Mass border, and actually the New Hampshire-Vermont border. So it's a wonderful ridge, and you can go for more than a mile along this ridge. Marco, I was mentioning him earlier. This is on top of Mount Misery, and I don't know why it got the name Misery. It's a beautiful hike, but it's in Voluntown. In Voluntown, and part of Patchogue. And Patchogue, I keep going back there. In fact, as I said, I was there earlier today. And it's like 28,000 acres, and there's hundreds of, maybe 100 miles or more of trails and old logging roads, and you can just go forever there. Anybody know where this is? There it is, Long Pond, L Pond, very good. That's also on the Narragansett Trail. We did it, this on this particular picture wasn't taken, but I've done that hike in one day, going from Lantern Hill in North Stonington, Ledyard, all the way to Asheville Pond in, help me out here, what's the name of the town? Huh? No, it's Rhode Island. Anyway, Hopkinton, Rhode Island. But anyway, there's a great view, and that's Long Pond. And then on the other side of the trail, there's L Pond, which is like this beautiful bog, and it's a National Historic Site. So, but it's a very challenging hike. There's a trail coming up, slide coming up that'll show that. This is surprising because you'd think this looks like it's really, this is actually part of the Newport Cliff Walk. And that's a beautiful, it's like 7 miles or so, and it goes from, and it's, the first part is all nice and paved sidewalk, and yeah, it's very deceptive. About 2/3 of the way, you get to very uneven surface, and it's very strenuous and challenging. But I encourage anybody who goes, in fact, I'm going to be in Newport tomorrow. My wife Lisa and I are going to go there. But it's a great walk, and if you take that, you can see not only the mansions, but once you get farther along, just this unbroken views of the ocean. There's Barn Island, and there's really a lot of history there too. It's not just beautiful salt meadow like this, but also it's the home. Once the homestead of Bencher Smith, who was an African enslaved person who bought his own freedom. But what's interesting, there's his little foundation that was maybe from here to the wall, not even that big, and that's where he lived for a while until he was able to buy his freedom. And first, there used to be a sign commemorating the foundation, but for some reason it no longer is there. I think that
it's being redone.
It is being. Thank you, Tom. A lot of people, I see a lot of familiar faces here, people that I've hiked with, kayaked with, and so forth. So it's great to reunite with them in this setting as well as out on the water or out on the trail. Bluff Point, again, I mentioned Bluff Point, and this was particularly rewarding for me because I served on that Bluff Point Advisory Council. I see Amby Burfoot hiding in the corner back there. when he went into the Peace Corps, I took his place on the Bluff Point Advisory Council back in the 1970s. And at the time, the state had commissioned a study, because they purchased a total of about 800 acres, and they were wondering what to do with it. And they commissioned a study, an engineering plan, and they were going to build it into like a Coney Island with Ferris wheels and roller coasters. And the park and that salt pond near the end, they were going to pave that, fill that in, pave it for 6,000 cars, and build a huge access road right down the middle of the bluff. So we persuaded the state to pass legislation to create the first and only coastal reserve in Connecticut. So it was a new concept at the time, and I'm thinking we're really grateful that it was preserved this way. Hammonasset is another great, and this is some people were in line earlier were talking about, some of the trails that we hike on are very challenging and rocky and hills and so forth. But if you, this is large parts of this are like handicap accessible, very flat, and yet very rewarding. Great views, and you can see seals in the wintertime, particularly off that. So that's a great resource. And Connecticut does, I think, a really admirable job, and Rhode Island as well, of preserving a lot of these properties. And part of my mission in writing this book was not just to inspire people to get out and hike, but also to express gratitude to all the people who have worked so hard and donated money and time and effort, labor, to preserve a lot of these properties. And a lot of people just sort of take them for granted. And so my mission has always been to acknowledge the great effort that these people have done, and then to thank them, and to hopefully to encourage more people to support land conservation. Statuist Point, has anybody people been in there? Yeah, it's in Middletown, Rhode Island, just east of Newport, and it's one of 5 national wildlife refuges in Rhode Island. And it's a wonderful, and again, it's perfectly handicapped accessible. It's like a 3-mile loop around this beautiful shoreline peninsula that juts out into the Atlantic. And if you're going, a good time to go and bundle up in the winter, because there's a whole proliferation of Arctic birds that migrate down. You can see them, seabirds, that hooded mergansers and help me out here, Maggie. Harlequin ducks. Those are my favorite. The really wildly colorful ducks and so forth that come there. And also, if you're really lucky, you can see a snowy white owl that occasionally flies in. But it's a great place, and it's only a 3-mile loop around, and it's free. Maggie, I think you took this picture. This was great, and that's Phil sitting there. That's Indian Council Caves in Barkhamsted. It's right on the Tunxix Trail. And this has been a particularly good year for moss. It likes this cold, damp weather, and it really, it just sort of explodes. So another thing that makes not just great views, but great trails. And we went out to Block Island earlier, and it was just sensational. Anybody, most people here, any people hiked on some of the trails out there, either Clayhead, yeah. Make that a goal of yours to get out there and spend. You can take the ferry, and you can make it a kind of a busy day trip, or if you can spend a couple of days, you can get out to. This one was actually Black Point, but there's another one, Clay Head, which is on the cover of the book, and that just knocked us out. And at the end of Clay Head Trail, it leads to North Light, and that whole, we got there, it was early spring, and it was, yeah. And it was just loaded, just all kinds of gray seals and harbor seals. They had just the new pups that were on the beach and so forth. It was a great, great experience. This is what I alluded to earlier. This is a trail that goes down from, if you're leaving from L Pond, Long Pond, that's on the Narragansett Trail. This is Laura Ely in the foreground, and there's Maggie and Phil going down this chasm. It's really incredible. It's very challenging. It's a short stretch, but it'll, you got to hang on to it and watch where you're putting your feet. Another great trail. This is off the Narragansett Trail. This again is in Patchogue and Voluntown. And again, 28,000 acres is, you come to these areas where all kinds of different ferns grow. Anyway, now this is a really nice place. We're jumping across the state to more western Connecticut in Litchfield. And this is the White Memorial Foundation. Has anyone been there? That's, yeah, a couple of people have. It's worth a trip. You can do it again, a day drive, leave early in the morning, get there, and you can walk. And it's beautiful trails, a nice long boardwalk through the marshes. This is one of my favorite little spots. This is a ravine that goes off of Sand Hill Road in Voluntown. And this is on part of the Narragansett Trail, and it goes to Greenfall Pond, and there's a dam at the end of this ravine. And you're going there, you think it's the forest primeval, but actually more than a century ago, this was a bustling little mill village, and you can still see some vestiges of the old foundations along the way. So it's always heartening to see that nature has a way of reclaiming itself, even some areas that were heavily developed and populated and used for industry. After they're abandoned, nature, it may take a while, but nature will reclaim it. But this is a nice challenge. It's a very challenging hike. That little short, it's about half a mile or so from Sand Hill Road to the dam, and then you can walk around Greenfall Pond. It's another 3 miles or so. A really nice, easy day hike, except for this part. Haley Farm. Again, I'm sure everybody has been there. It's great for four season. All these trails are good for four season. Like the old cliche, there's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing and gear. So that's a great popular spot for snowshoeing, cross-country skiing. When I was looking at a map, and this is in Watch Hill, East Beach, and it occurred to me in looking at maps and so forth, I think that stretch of sand that goes from there to Weekapaug to where it might be the longest unbroken stretch of sand anywhere in this immediate area. And so I thought that would make a nice hike, just to start there at Watch Hill, walk along the beach, and then return that way. Which you can turn around any place, but if you did the whole thing, it's about 10 miles. But this one was in winter, and it's nice going in winter because there's nobody else there except for birds. That's Betsy. I think you took this picture, Betsy Graham. Round of applause for Betsy. Yeah, we were hiking out on Napatry Point, and that's also I'm sure everybody's been there or at least seen there. It's a wonderful spot. If you do Napatry, you can do the whole perimeter. You can stop at the old remnants of Fort Mansfield, which turned out to have been built. It didn't do what it was supposed to set out to. You can probably tell the story.
No, none of the coastal forts did what they were supposed to.
Yeah. Well, there was a flaw in the design of this fort. It was supposed to, right after the Spanish-American War, they were worried about invasion. And so they built this fort out there, except that they positioned the gun turrets so that any enemy fleet could just hug the shore, and there's no way that they could have gotten the guns. So anyway, they finally dismantled it, and now it's just sort of, it's all a natural area. Great Walls, that's another aspect. I was this was with, I don't know if anybody knows Mark Starr from North Stonington. He wrote a couple of really nice books, including one on native walls, and it opened up our eyes to the whole concept of native walls. Everybody used to assume that every stone wall that you saw on the trail was built by colonials to either mark boundaries or contain sheep or whatever. But everybody seems to agree now that a lot of these, much earlier provenance built by indigenous people hundreds or thousands of years before the colonists arrived in the 17th century. So this is one. He took us on a nice tour. This was taken at the Tri-Town Ridgeline Forest Preserve, which includes North Stonington, Griswold, and Preston. Have anybody hiked on that? It's a relatively new. Yeah, it's a challenging hike. It's like if you did the whole loop, it's like 5 miles, but it's like almost 1,000 feet of elevation gain. You go up Brickstown Mountain and one other mountain there. So it's a good workout, but it's a beautiful hike, and there's a lot of good walls. Great squeezes. That's my friend Carl Astor. That's have people been to Chatfield Hollow? It's another popular spot that's in Killingworth, and this one, this particular formation is called Fat Man Squeeze. Although Carl is not fat, you can't tell it, but that's another great. But it's pretty challenging. There are ways you can get a skirt around there. You don't have to go through that, but it makes it more interesting to try to get through there. This is the Bear Cave. I think that's you, Phil, right? So this is very hard to find. Johnny Kelly, who used to be the high school cross-country coach when I first moved to this area, and I used to train with the team, he took me and the rest of the team. We ran out there along the Narragansett Trail. If you're leaving from Wyasip Lake, you follow the Blue Blaze Trail, and this is on Bullet Ledge, but it's very hard to find. And I got lost more than once, and Thomas and I went out there many times trying to find it, and then I finally relocated it somehow. But it's a great hike, and it's a huge cavern, but it's not a limestone cavern. It's called a fault cavern, so it created by cascading rocks that just sort of form this opening. But it's great. You can walk around in it and bring a headlamp. Great traditions. How many people have gone up on the? Yeah, I see a few people. This wasn't taken last year. But I went up there also just a few weeks ago. This is on top of Lantern Hill in North Stonington, and on the first day of spring, the first sunrise of the first day of spring, the Westerly Morris dancers show up, and they perform a little dance ritual, and they have played instruments and accordions and or concertinas, I should say, and it's a great thing to see. So I'd encourage you, but it means you have to get up early, like 5:30 or so, and get to the trailhead by 6-ish, and then get up there in time for the sunrise. Great waterfalls. This is Chapman Falls, which is in Devil's Hop Yard. That's sort of part of the 8 Mile River that continues down south. And Devil's Hop Yard supposedly got its name because of the Satan's footprints, or cloven foot, are burrowed into the. He was mad about something, and he dug his claws into the rocks and created Chapman Falls. Great maps. As I said, it's nice to sort of go out and just hit the trail sometime, but it helps to have maps. And sometimes, even as I talked about earlier today, even with a map, we still wind up taking a few wrong turns. But it's good to have them. Great signs. The Connecticut Forest and Park Association, as I mentioned earlier, if you hike anywhere in Connecticut, you'll probably encounter their blue blazes, and they're a wonderful organization. But there's some not so great signs. And this was on the north-south trail, and so it's a good rule of thumb just not to trespass, especially when you see a sign like that. Great dining. That's actually in our backyard, or back behind our house somewhere. And that's I like eating outdoors. I'm sure most of you do as well. Great birding, going with Maggie and Phil and Andy, all are interested in birds, and so we always get a lecture, a formative lecture on ornithology and so forth. And so many of the preserves that we visit, I mean, they're just loaded with birds, particularly the ones in Rhode Island. I mean, the shore ones are fantastic. But I think this was North Stonington, and that was some great spots. I was on the Connecticut River earlier this week, and we saw bald eagles and cormorants, and also planes landing right over our head, coming into Goodspeed Airport there, so that was kind of cool. And great friends, as I said. It's nice, I do some hiking alone, but it's always good to have company on the trail. And it's a nice time to chat, leave all your troubles behind, and just focus on the beauty of the outdoors that we enjoy. And that's it.